I never thought a word as plain as ma'am could trip me up. But it was the way she reacted. How her eyes lingered, the smallest curve at the edge of her mouth. That's what stayed with me. It started in the most ordinary place. The auto repair shop where I'd been working since finishing school. Grease under my nails, the faint buzz of an old fluorescent light overhead, the hiss of air compressors. Nothing romantic about it. Until she walked in. I recognized her instantly, Mrs. Hayes, my friend Dylan's mom. I hadn't seen her up close in years. In high school, she was just the mom who picked Dylan up after practice, waving from her car window. But standing there in the shop doorway, framed by the dusty sunlight cutting through, she looked different. Still composed, still carrying herself with that quiet authority, but softened somehow. Her hair was pinned loosely, a few strands slipping free. She had that kind of presence that made everyone else in the room straighten their backs without meaning to. I wiped my hands on a rag and forced myself to sound professional. "Afternoon, ma'am. What can I help you with?" That's when it happened. Her gaze snapped to mine, sharp for a second, then softened. "Don't call me ma'am," she said, almost under her breath, but with a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Every time you do, I melt." I thought she was joking, but my chest tightened anyway. I laughed it off, too quickly, too loud, and pointed at her car parked outside. "So, what's going on with the Honda?" She tilted her head like she'd caught something in my voice, but she didn't press. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest, tapping one finger lightly against her elbow. "Brakes feel loose," she said. "Could be nothing, but it rattles." I nodded, trying to focus on her words and not the fact that I suddenly couldn't keep eye contact. There was something in the way she spoke. Measured, calm, like she wasn't in a hurry the way most customers were. As if she had the time to watch me squirm. When I slid into her car to test it, she leaned against the frame of the open garage door, her silhouette caught in the light. I stole a glance just a second too long. She noticed. I knew she noticed. I told myself it was just nerves. She was Dylan's mom. She was older, much older. But when I explained what needed fixing, she listened like my words mattered. Like I wasn't just some kid covered in oil stains. That felt rarer than it should have. After we settled the details, she handed me her keys. Her fingers brushed mine. Not deliberate, not long, but enough. And then the pause. That half second where she could have let go cleanly but didn't. Where her eyes lifted, just briefly, to meet mine. The shop was too quiet in that moment. Even the compressor hiss cut out. I swallowed. Said something stupid, something filler. She smiled politely, broke the pause, and walked back toward the lobby. But the air stayed thick long after. When she left, her perfume clung faintly to the rag I'd used to wipe my hands. Something floral, sharp at first, then soft. I told myself I imagined it. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The shop had closed hours ago, but she'd come back. Said the brakes were still spongy, that something didn't feel right. Truth was, I think she just didn't want to wait until morning. And maybe I didn't either. The rain outside was steady, drumming on the tin roof, spilling down the windows in uneven streaks. The lights hummed low, throwing long shadows over the workbenches. It was too quiet, except for her heels clicking softly against the concrete as she walked toward me. "You're here late," she said. I held up a wrench, tried to sound casual. "Guess I lost track of time." She didn't answer right away, just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with that unreadable half-smile. I wiped sweat from my forehead, though the air was cool. Her presence did something to the space, made it feel smaller, more charged. After a while, she spoke again, softer this time. "Dylan used to say you'd stay behind after practice, that you worked harder than anyone else." I froze, wrench halfway back into the drawer. I hadn't known she remembered things like that. Yeah, well, didn't exactly have the talent, so had to make up for it somehow. Her laugh was short, warm, almost sad. "You sell yourself short." The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. I wanted to ask her why she came back, if it was really just the brakes. Instead, I focused on the job, on bolts, pressure, torque. Anything but the way her hair had slipped loose in the damp air, or how she kept tucking it back behind her ear only for it to fall again. She pulled out her phone at one point, glanced at the screen, and her whole expression changed, tightened. She pressed her lips together, turned the phone face down on the counter. I didn't ask, but I noticed her fingers trembling slightly before she folded them under her arm. The silence stretched. Too much silence. "You ever feel like you stayed somewhere too long?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was careful, like she wasn't really asking me, just speaking into the air. I set down the wrench, looked at her, wanted to say, "I feel that right now, standing this close to you." But all I managed was, "Sometimes." Her eyes met mine then, steady, searching. The rain outside seemed louder, like it was pressing us inward. We didn't move at first, but I felt myself leaning closer. Not enough to cross a line, but enough to feel her nearness. Her perfume mingled with the metallic tang of oil and rain-soaked air. My hand was on the counter, inching forward without permission. I could almost imagine the warmth of hers if I reached just a little further. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was about to say something. But then, sharp, too loud in the quiet, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I didn't read before she flipped it over again. The moment broke. She drew in a breath, steadied herself. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You should go now." My hand was halfway to hers when she said it. And I did. But only my body left that room. The next time I saw her wasn't planned. She came to pick up the car after closing, again waiting until the shop was empty. I told myself it was coincidence, but the thought didn't stick. The air inside was still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound sharper. The scrape of a chair, the hum of the soda machine in the corner. She set her purse on the counter, smoothed her sleeve like she needed something for her hands to do. "You fixed it?" she asked. "Yeah." My voice cracked on that single word. Cleared my throat. "Drive smooth now." She nodded but didn't reach for the keys. Just let them sit between us on the counter, untouched. I tried to think of something else to say. Anything. Instead, the silence stretched so thin it felt like it might snap. Finally, she looked at me. Not quick, not passing, really looked. And in that stillness, I heard myself asking, before I could stop it, "What are we doing?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She blinked, once, slowly, like the question itself carried weight she hadn't wanted to name. I rushed to fill the gap. "I mean, you come here late and I stay later than I need to. And there's this." I gestured vaguely between us, helpless. "This thing we don't talk about." She inhaled, sharp but quiet, then let it out just as slowly. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "You're young," she said finally. Not unkind, but as if that explained everything. I almost laughed, but it came out strained. "And you're not. Is that the point?" She flinched at that. Not visibly, not dramatic. Just a tiny shift in her shoulders, like the words landed where she didn't want them to. Her hand twitched toward the keys, then stopped halfway. She didn't pick them up. Instead, she whispered, "This isn't supposed to happen." The room felt too small, my pulse too loud. "Maybe not," I said. "But it is." We stood there, the counter between us, the rain outside muffled but steady. Neither of us moved. My chest ached with all the words I couldn't find. And her eyes were caught somewhere between wanting to hold steady and wanting to run. I thought she'd tell me to stop, to forget it, to laugh it off like nothing. But she didn't. She just pressed her lips together, fingers curling against the counter's edge, knuckles pale. I waited. For anything. For her to speak, to break the spell, to dismiss it. But she didn't say anything. Just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. It was supposed to be routine oil change, nothing more. She sat in the waiting area, thumbing absently through a magazine she didn't read, while I worked under the lift. I tried to keep my mind on the job, but my chest still carried the weight of that night, of words I shouldn't have said out loud. When I finished, I wiped my hands and walked toward the counter. She was staring at her phone again, jaw tight, thumb hovering over the screen. "You okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. She startled a little, then forced a smile. "Just messages." She turned the phone face down. I didn't push, but when I slid her receipt across the counter, her hand stayed still instead of reaching for it. She was looking at me with this fragile, almost unguarded expression. Then she said it, so softly I almost thought I misheard. "You remind me of him." I blinked. "Who?" Her eyes dropped, tracing the corner of the counter. She took a moment, steadying herself, then answered. "My brother. He was younger than me, always chasing something bigger, always trying to prove himself. She cut herself off, swallowed hard. "He died when he was 22. The words landed heavy between us. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt dry. "I'm sorry," I murmured. She nodded once, briskly, but her eyes glistened in a way that betrayed her composure. "It was a long time ago, but when you're around." She shook her head slightly, as though the thought was dangerous to finish. Something inside me shifted. Not attraction, not confusion, something deeper. Like I'd stumbled into a room she never let anyone see. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "That why you keep your distance?" Her breath hitched. She didn't answer right away, just pressed her palms against the counter as though grounding herself. Finally, she said, "Maybe, or maybe it's because I know better. I've already lost enough." Silence filled the space again, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't avoidance, it was shared, heavy, alive. Without thinking, I reached out and touched the edge of her receipt, sliding it closer to her hand. Not quite touching, but close enough that if she wanted, she could bridge the gap. Her fingers hovered, trembled, then withdrew, but her eyes stayed on mine. And for the first time, they didn't hold fear. They didn't hold that careful retreat I'd gotten used to. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. The shop was empty again. Always empty when it came to her. She'd come to drop off a check, though we both knew she could have mailed it or called or done anything except show up after hours. She set the envelope on the counter, smoothed the paper flat with the palm of her hand, and left it there. I didn't reach for it. Neither did she. We just stood. "I shouldn't keep coming here," she said finally, voice low, almost apologetic. "Then why do you?" I asked. My words came softer than I meant, like I didn't want to scare her away. Her lips pressed together. She didn't answer right away, just leaned back slightly, her hand drifting toward her wrist like she wanted to steady her own pulse. Then, "Because it feels different here. Safer." That stopped me. I'd never thought of myself or this place as safe for anyone. I wanted to ask her safe from what, but I didn't. The answer was already flickering in her eyes, unspoken. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was patient. I walked around the counter, slow steps echoing in the stillness. She didn't move back, didn't fold her arms, didn't hide behind the small gestures she usually used to guard herself. We stood a breath apart, neither of us pretending anymore. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, "but I know I don't want it to stop." Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, weighing, soft in a way I hadn't seen before. She didn't argue, didn't deflect with logic or the word young or the word wrong. Instead, she let out a long exhale, shaky at the edges. "Me either." That was it. No declarations, no promises, just that sliver of honesty between us. I felt my hand move before I made the choice, hesitant, stopping just shy of hers on the counter. My fingertips barely brushed the back of her hand. The contact was small, almost nothing, but the room seemed to tilt with it. She didn't pull away. Her shoulders relaxed, her chin dipped just slightly. For the first time, I saw her without the armor. No practiced composure, no careful distance. Just a woman standing close enough for me to hear her breath, close enough for the space between us to mean something we couldn't name out loud. We didn't kiss. We didn't even embrace. We just stood there, touching hands lightly, the quiet folding over us like a secret. And in that fragile silence, I knew the truth. We'd already crossed whatever line we'd been pretending was there. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. I think about that night more than I admit. Not because anything dramatic happened, no grand kiss, no sweeping declarations. Just two people standing too close, holding silence like it was something fragile we didn't want to drop. It's been months since then. Life didn't suddenly rearrange itself into some perfect story. She still carries her past the way we all do, with the weight of what she's lost and the careful steps of someone afraid to lose again. And me? I still stumble, still second-guess myself, still catch my reflection and see a kid trying to fill shoes that feel too big. But something shifted between us. I learned that love, or whatever you want to call the thing that pulls one person toward another, isn't about fireworks or clean lines. It's about the quiet permission to be seen, even in the mess, even in the fear. She let me see her when she didn't have to, and I stopped pretending I wasn't already changed by her presence. We never named it. We still don't. Sometimes we just sit in her kitchen, her hair tied back, a half-finished cup of tea between us. Sometimes I fix the sink or change the light bulb she insists she could have done herself. Other times we just sit in the silence, comfortable now, not heavy. I think that's what surprised me most. That silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it's the truest form of closeness. What changed in her? I can't speak fully for her, but I know this. Her laughter comes easier now. Not the careful, polite kind, but the kind that escapes before she can catch it. And her eyes, they don't carry that same guarded watchfulness, at least not with me. What changed in me? I stopped measuring myself against the number on my license. I stopped telling myself that because I was young, I couldn't understand. Maybe understanding doesn't come from age, but from willingness, from listening, from staying when it would have been easier to run. And what changed in the nature of love? Maybe nothing. Maybe love has always been this ordinary moments charged with extraordinary meaning. The brush of a hand, the pause before a word, the courage it takes to admit that you want someone, not because it's easy or expected, but because they make you feel more like yourself than you did before. She didn't say she loved me. She didn't have to. What she gave me was something quieter, rarer, the trust of being let in. And that was enough. More than enough. So if you're watching this, maybe ask yourself, what silence in your life deserves listening to? What small moment, right in front of you, might already be changing everything? Because sometimes the loudest truths are the ones we never say out loud.